In beauty may I walk. My name is Reverend Carol Ann Rubin, and I invite you to come inside. Sit down, sit with us. Take a breath. Take a deep, holy breath. Let it go. In this breath, there is no where. There is no thing. There is only you. There is only me. There is only our awareness. Now I want you to consider who is being aware. Is it my body? It's not my body. Is it my mind? Well, it's aware of my mind, so whatever it is, it's not my mind, it's something else. Is it my thoughts? Well, no, because I'm aware of my thoughts as well, so it must be something other than my thoughts. Is it my essence? Is it my soul? This is one of those moments where words are limiting in this context. So I'm just going to choose one or two and allow them to serve as they will. So in this context, I'm the thinker. This part of me is the thinker or the observer. And I observe lovingly. I observe my thoughts, current and past. I observe all that is around me, and I recognize that this is a space of connection. Connection to source, connection to all sentient beings, connection to my center, to myself, whatever that is. But this is a space of clarity and grace. And this is the space from which all things are possible, and I can do no harm. In beauty may I walk. It is in this space that I have been resting and pondering some of the phenomenal women who have gone before me. And one such woman is named Grace Lee Boggs. And I would like to share a small bit of her story with you right now. Both of her parents were born and raised in China, but she was born in 1915 in Providence, Rhode Island, the first U.S.-born person in her family. She had a varied and wild childhood and upbringing, but I'm going to skip over all of that and just tell you that at 16 years old on scholarship, she went to Barnard College. At 16, this is in the 30s. That's something in and of itself. She received a PhD from Bryn Mawr in 1940, but being a woman and a Chinese person, no university would hire her to teach ethics or political thought, of course. So she moved to Chicago, and she got a low-paying job in a philosophy library. May I walk in beauty. In Chicago, she first encountered her very first encounters with African-American community. These are a whole category of folks that she had only thought of as statistics in books, in ethical books. She thought of them as a group of people who moved in and out of different awarenesses. But in Chicago, she actually had experiences of the actual people for the first time. And by 1941, she had participated in the March on Washington, the original one, the long before the famous one in the 60s with Martin Luther King, the one that always comes to mind when we think of the March on Washington. This was back in the 40s. And thus began her path as a civil rights activist. In beauty, may I walk. A decade earlier than that, at the onset of the Great Depression, it was a time of great political upheaval in America and around the world. Folks came together and discussed great political concepts, wild and varied, in great detail, espousing some and dismissing others, much like Ernest Holmes and his contemporaries did with their salons and discussions around the nature of existence, consciousness, and connection, unity, responsibility. Like many intellectuals that came of age during the Great Depression, Grace became enraged at the injustices of the economy and gravitated toward socialism. She entertained the ideas of a great many political movements, always led by her ethical consciousness. In beauty, may I walk. She translated works from other ethicists and political thinkers into English and wrote articles for The Correspondence. This was a periodical that was named for the Committee for Correspondence, an underground network of communication among patriotic leaders during the American Revolution. And she began to think of herself as a revolutionary. In beauty, may I walk. Soon she moved to Detroit, where another political activist community was organizing, and began to work with the auto workers and intellectuals there. They organized and worked against discrimination and for full employment. She was very active in many predominantly Black civil rights movements and organizations, and with many individuals, including A. Philip Randolph during the early years of the Second World War, and later with Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and many others. The FBI regularly visited their little house on Detroit's east side. In beauty, may I walk. She once joked that the FBI must have classified her as Afro-Chinese since her husband and closest friends were Black. She lived in mostly African-American neighborhoods, and she made the struggle for civil rights for Asian Americans, African Americans, and any oppressed group her life's work. I find it personally very fascinating that a political opinion, poverty or wealth, and any association with others are determining factors when folks look upon me. They can actually decide who they think I am based on those things and any number of others, when much of my time I spend not really focused on or thinking about or even aware of who I am. In beauty, may I walk. Grace herself was too disciplined a theorist and too pragmatic an activist to be attracted to some of the more militant Black Power organizations. She and her husband tried to organize young Black activists into a revolutionary party, but they failed and their revolution did not come. Still, Grace was not bitter. She was seldom bitter. She maintained her faith in the people as the social fabric, even as the social fabric of Detroit suffered more and more. She saw urban crime as the poisonous byproduct of advanced capitalism and as a moral crisis. In beauty, may I walk. In her 70s, she began attending meetings of Black women who led marches against violence and developed a conflict resolution curriculum for Detroit's public schools. Her new political focus was on questions of ethics and individual change. She launched Detroit Summer, bringing in youthful organizers and creating community gardens, working with school children. Later, she collaborated to create a new generation of leaders, starting with inner city kids. These same kids later started their own charter school. In beauty, may I walk. She lived until 2015, some 100 years of life. By her last days, she was, by her own words, more evolutionary than revolutionary. Grace was passionate, but seldom dogmatic, and unlike many of her cohort, she was perfectly willing to reconsider her political positions. In her view, revolution was a process, and it required improvisation and a long-term view. In her memoir, Living for Change, Grace wrote that, quote, "Reality is constantly changing, and we must be wary of becoming stuck in ideas that have come out of past experiences and have lost their usefulness in the struggle to create the future." They have lost their usefulness in the struggle to create the future. Grace knew that our thoughts create a reality. In beauty, may I walk. So I'm going to invite you to return to that space that we created at the beginning of this talk. Just take a moment to ground in, bringing grace with us. Invite you into that space where there is only you. That space where the thinker thinks and the observer observes. Where there is clarity and grace. I think this is where Grace lived. This is where her revolution turned to evolution. And this is where my evolution continues. This is where I go to lovingly observe and trust my heart to lead me forward. In beauty, may I walk. I know, as I believe Grace knew, that this time, this body, this thought is temporary. My love, my grace are too great to be contained in this time, and so is yours. I will instead choose to walk this path through my life in beauty, in joy, in love, in gratitude, in stillness, in forgiveness, in loving kindness, and in peace. Thank you for walking this path with me. Namaste.